はい、おはようございます。本日はご多様の中、ロボット革命産業 IoT 国際シンポジウム2024にご参加いただきありがとうございます。私はロボット革命産業 IoT イニシアティブ協議会 RRI の中富と申します。本日は国際シンポジウムの開会のご挨拶をさせていただきます。本シンポジウムは RRI が日本の経済産業省とドイツの経済気候保護省との共催を得て開催をいたします。また、スクリーンに表示してございますように、スポンサーがいらっしゃいます。スポンサーの皆様のご支援に心から感謝申し上げます。本シンポジウムは、2015年に初回を行い、毎年続けておりまして、回を重ね、今年で10回目となります。グローバルのリーダー、専門家の方々にご参加いただき、産業 IoT にまつわる先進事例を学ぶとともに、将来像や課題および対応について議論を重ねてまいりました。第10回となる今回は Call for Action、社会イノベーションに向けた製造変革をテーマとしております。この後のセッション1では、製造変革のイネーブラ、データスペースをテーマとし、ものづくりの世界でデジタルエコシステムがどのように形成され、どのような期待値で参加しているのかご紹介いただきます。午後からになりますが、セッション2では、産業の持続可能性をテーマとし、労働生産性の向上や気候変動危機など、各国共通の課題に対する欧州、アメリカの動向を紹介いただくとともに、課題を解決するためのDX、AI 応用などのデジタル施策における各国の課題や、国際協業で解決すべき論点をご議論いただきます。セッション3は、ドイツプラットフォームインダストリー 4.0 と RRI の連携協力の進捗報告となります。国際標準化、産業セキュリティ、ビジネスエコシステム、そして昨年からは産業データ連携を加えて、日独の専門家による議論が活発に行われておりますが、その進捗状況を報告していただきます。また、セッション終了後、夕方6時半から、こちらと同じビルの2階にございますレストラン日陰におきまして、ネットワーキングの準備をしております。軽食とお飲み物を準備しておりますので、ぜひご参加いただきますようお願いいたします。それでは、本国際シンポジウムの開催を宣言いたします。はじめに、セッション1の進行役と、パネルディスカッションのモデレーターを務めていただく、もう皆さんご存知かと思いますが、RRI の中島さんをご紹介いたします。中島さんは RRI 事務局におきまして、長らく WG1 が IoT による製造ビジネス変革ワーキンググループを担当しておられます。中島さん、よろしくお願いいたします。
はい、ありがとうございます。中富様、ご挨拶ありがとうございました。それではですね、始めていきたいんですが、まずセッションに入る前にですね、1点だけお願いがございます。今日パネルディスカッション、我々パネルディスカッション、かなり長い時間をとってですね、しっかり議論していきたいというふうに思っているんですが、講演者の方に質問されたい場合はですね、YouTube の、今回オンラインで入られている方もご存知だと思いますけど、YouTube の概要欄にですね、あるリンクからですね Q&A できるところに飛べるようになっておりますので、スライドという、仕組みを使いましてですね、質問を受け付けられるようになってますので、 ご質問とあとご所属、お名前等々をですね、記入いただければですね、我々の方でそれを見ながら適宜、質問をこのパネルの中に入れていきたいと思っておりますので、よろしくお願いいたします。それではですね、セッションに移りたいと思います。最初の登壇者ですけれども、ドイツ経済気候保護省次長のヘッス様でございます。講演タイトルは The Necessity of Industrial Data Sharing for Future Growth ということでございます。それではですね、ヘッスさん、よろしくお願いいたします。
Dear Nakatomi-san, ladies and gentlemen, minasama. My name is Markus Heß. I'm the Deputy Director General of the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action of Germany, and I'm deeply honored to attend today's meeting. I want to thank the RRI for the kind invitation for this event. This year, we're celebrating 12 years of Industry 4.0. In this time frame, Japan, especially the RRI, was always a trusted, reliable, and respected partner. RRI itself was founded 10 years ago, and I've been on this journey for 8 years, so we all together have a long way behind us and a long way in front of us. This should illustrate the long way. Here we are. As you can see, we've started 2011, but the main action since 2015 and ongoing. The concepts created within the global Industry 4.0 framework are remarkable if you look at the milestones on the timeline. The platform Industry 4.0, together with its international cooperation partners, was able to set up or to support multiple successful initiatives with an outstanding footprint on a global scale. Just to name a few: the Asset Administration Shell, Industrial Digital Twin Association, OPC UA, Labs Network Industry, Standardization Council Industry 4.0, and if you look at the timeline, after 2019, the X is there. It's Gaia X, it's Catena X, it's Manufacturing X, and now, today, it's Factory X, and many other initiatives and projects. I'd like to thank Japan, government and industries, and the RRI for their valuable contributions. Without you, we would not be where we are today. This is true on the bilateral basis, but it's also true on a multilateral basis. Together, we share the view that Industry 4.0 is a global concept, as industry value chains are global. International collaboration, supported by a strong community of contributors from businesses, governments, and academia, is the basis for the success. Just together and only together, we can succeed. Today, we can build on the trustful exchange of concepts and ideas around the globe. One concept is that Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing is fully data-driven. Today, but even more in the future, no data, no data treatment, no business. The underlying concept of industrial data ecosystems highlights the tremendous potential of trustful and federated utilization of data. These ecosystems will strengthen the resilience and sustainability of global supply chains. And even more, it is key to set the future competitiveness of our industries in all sectors. Data only has value if we are able to enable it across sectors. Its value can increase exponentially if you use data together with business partners. To be successful, we need, to our conviction, three things. First, a common global systemic approach. Second, a broad adoption of industrial data ecosystems and the expansion of digital infrastructure. And third, openness, transparency, and the use of open source are essential. The German government will continuously support the development of sovereign industrial data ecosystems. To achieve this, we need to set a common regulatory framework and standards, a technical base layer where shared services can be easily used. Every industry sector should be integrated step by step. But these must also be international compatible and globally operational. Here comes International Manufacturing X into play. We introduced Manufacturing X as a truly international initiative from scratch. It will develop and implement scalable concepts, how to utilize data along the value chain, while users keep control over their data. Your data, your decision. Trust and benefit for all participants are essential for its success. We think it's important, connection of data of different manufacturing value chains across industries and countries, enabling innovative solutions across the value chains in an interoperable and sovereign way, and the connection of country-specific interoperability frameworks and setup of common standards. Dear ladies and gentlemen, today's symposium is the perfect ground to understand the new concepts developed in the last year and the achievements made. I would like to encourage the companies and experts to take advantage of the opportunities for cooperation to ensure the global interoperability of various solutions and technologies. I wish you, from the deepest of my heart, a fruitful and successful symposium. Thank you for your attention. Arigato.
エス様ありがとうございました。次の講演者はですね、マニファクチャリング X のメンバーでもあり、ピア 4.0 のメンバーでもあります、シーメンスのフェローでありますトーマス・ハーンさんにお願いしたいと思います。講演タイトルは Making Manufacturing X International となります。それではですね、ハーンさんよろしくお願いいたします。
Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure after the opening from my side to start with the first presentation about international manufacturing or make manufacturing X international. Like Markus Heß explained a little bit the journey which we have taken, and you have seen also the different milestones where 80–90% we are doing together with Japan when you are just calculating the years about the cooperation and since we are existing. Also my name is Thomas Hahn. I'm a fellow, Siemens fellow at Siemens as a company, taking nearly just from the beginning in my job outside of Siemens, taking care for Plattform Industrie 4.0 Manufacturing X initiative, and inside, as you can imagine, also for the technology aspects which we are doing in the company, with the aspects like Markus has mentioned regarding competitiveness, resilience, and sustainability. But let's start, coming from industry, let's start with two examples to make it a little bit more touchable, and then I will dig in a little bit about the concepts, what we are doing together, what are the tasks we want to achieve together, and how we set this all up. And I have also to say a special thanks to Nakashima-san, because we are working super closely in this environment together to get it done together. But let's start with two examples or three examples. Well known, I think everybody in the room is aware of this example, but it's shown quite well why data ecosystems, data, the use of data, and to get value out of the data to improve something or to do or to start something is from high relevance, and in this case also for industry. And I give you two examples here at the first slide. One is when you're thinking about CO2 emission reporting and optimizing, because at the end we have to look how we reduce this. And when you're looking, we have several representatives from industry. When you're looking at your own shop floor, you are seeing maybe, depending what you are producing, 10 to 20% of the CO2 emission. And you can imagine the 90 or 80% is in the upstream and downstream. And when you really want to have an overview about your emission respective, when you really want to have an optimization for the emission to reduce the CO2 emission, then you have to look at the complete chain or value chain or supply chain, however, what is needed depending what you're doing. Also meaning we have to look to the left and to the right and to get data transparency around. Second example is regarding battery. When you're looking at a battery and the one of the other regions are highly depending on rare material. But the good thing also on batteries are you can recycle a lot. You see here a number 96, 95%, also high. And you can imagine this is also improving then our dependency or reducing our dependencies because we can recycle a lot. But also this is only possible when you have, let's say, and Markus has mentioned also the digital twin, when you have the complete overview, when you have the passport, how the battery is produced, used, and then you can optimize, the recycling to put it into a circular economy. And only to get this a little bit more touchable, only to see a little bit, you see here, it's an example from Catena X, in X projects in the automotive area. And for sure, battery optimization on the use to optimize the use of the batteries, but also to collect step by step the different information exactly to have this potential to recycle or to better use the battery. You see here an example from a battery passport. You see it how it's going along the complete chain from the mining up to the recycling. I will not touch in the detail. And on the other side, you see some kind of categories where you collect the data depending what you want to do. And you see here also how additional information are increasingly collected, stored decentral, especially in the example of a battery, this is sometimes, or very often is in a car built and is somewhere, but it's really collected consequently about the different steps, and you get here the information from the partners very quick. This is only to give you one touchable example why this is so important to have this data transparency. This was two use cases. I am very sure in this room we will collect hundreds of use cases in doing this, but really it's only some kind of, to setting a little bit the scene, what is driving us. Other example is, security topics. This is one of the use cases which we are touching in the Factory X project. Catena X was automotive. Factory X is exactly going down to the machine tool building industry, going down to the shop floor, where we have some kind of concrete use cases, where you have on the one side the horizontal, and on the second side the connectivity down to the, or vertical down to the shop floor. And to collect the data and to have on your system, and as one or others knowing this, to fulfill some kind of, in Europe called Cyber Resilience Act, so that you can say what status of the software is on your device. Is this actual security software installed or not? So we are obliged, we want and are obliged to doing this. This is one of the use cases which we are targeting in factories. It's only to give you 2-3 examples why this is important, why data transparency is important, how we are doing this, and how we are doing this together, which I will touch on some slides later. Going back a little bit about the general needs we have. We have here, and I touched this before with the battery, we have some kind of Deployment, depending what is needed, can be close to the production line, can be close to the cloud, is depending what you want to achieve with your use case or with your business case. Data sharing, I think I mentioned above before, how this is done in the 3 use cases and why this is needed. And, to get it done, you have to look regarding interoperability. So this is somehow the right column, the right topic. But, and this is for me one of the most important sentences on the slide, nobody can do this alone. So we have to look together how we are doing this in a global way, how we are doing this and drive interoperability, respecting local needs and local environments, local infrastructure, and also needs from different verticals, but looking how we can achieve a certain level of interoperability, which we can do together. And I have to say, we have yesterday evening during the dinner a short discussion about Japanese and German attitude to address topics and engineering tasks. We are in this case quite similar. I will exclude, and this is a German talk about the train system in Germany. I apologize for this, but when you're looking to the engineering stuff, we are quite on have a similar attitude in doing this. And that's the reason why we have here over years a very good cooperation and impactful and with a lot of results. That's what we have to do and how we are doing this. And you see here we have different manufacturing domains. You see here around the circle. You see the car, which was the example for Catena X. You see a robot system on the left side. It was a symbol for Factory X. You have the chemical elements on the left side, where we are speaking about material passport and chemical processes. You have energy, you have food and beverage, and aerospace, and. Also we have a huge bunch of verticals, which we are, and that's an important topic in the middle, doing together in the International Manufacturing X, addressing this together, looking what are interoperability needs and how we can address this together. International Manufacturing X is an initiative, and as mentioned before, Catena X, Factory X, Semiconductor X are projects to implement the principles in an interoperable way for the specific vertical application. And what we want to do, and it's not a surprise because Markus Heß mentioned this, what we really want to do is to look resilience. It could be on the one side a supply chain. As we know, during the COVID crisis, we have several hiccups in companies. I can tell you also by myself how we handle this to make this more resilient. Can be also, but we are touching this in the afternoon more regarding skills, availability, also to have the know-how, the people together, some other aspect of resilience. Sustainability, I think I touched this before. And last but not least, competitiveness. For sure, this cooperation helps Japan, helps German companies to be more productive. And I was quite happy that today in the morning when Kaidan Ren was an article in the press exactly addressing the topic about the competitiveness and also data sharing or data transparency, and also regarding CO2 mentioned what to address. And I think internationally, and I think we are here on a very good way together. We have some kind of overall picture how we are doing this. I mentioned a little bit the attitude, the use cases, but we have somehow also to sort it out. You have here on the top level, again, the impact, what we want, great, sustainability, resilience, and competitiveness. Then, we can do a lot in optimizing existing processes, but we can do much more to find new business opportunities. Could be an as-a-service, production machinery as-a-service, could be also an environment where you can use or install new applications. You see the use cases. I think I touched 2 before, but what we have to look for is for shared services. And I see here Otto-san for example, here in the room. Since years, we are working together on the OPC Foundation. We are both on the board of the OPC Foundation. To see here, we are living this international collaboration since years for the reason, like I mentioned before. How is then implemented? How is then realized in reality? How is, again, here respecting the local infrastructure and also competitive solutions? This is somehow done in their technology base level. So it could be different. You know, we have the discussion in the last years, only to make it quite clear. Use cases somehow Confinity, Catena X, which is some kind of looking in a pre-competitive environment, what is needed, what are the standards. The operating model is, for example, in this case with Confinity X, which can be in Japan, for example, different. And last but not least, in doing this here to drive interoperability. So, sometimes, go back. Sorry for this. In a nutshell, in this international cooperation, we have 3 layers which we want to do. Exchange what we are doing, knowledge, learning from each other, knowledge transfer and learning from each other. Think about the examples which I mentioned before. To look what is the infrastructure, think about my words before, and for sure looking how we can define common standards, interoperability to get it done, respecting the different environment, the different needs in the countries, respecting also the different verticals, and for sure giving also the company some kind of environment to have a competitive solution. How we've done this, I can make it super short because Markus has showed this slide before. We're doing this between us in deep joint projects, like you have seen before. But we're doing this, let's say, also on the international level from Americas over Europe to Asia. And I'm super proud because exactly 1 year ago, we launched this International Manufacturing X Corporation. You see this with a yellow box, a green box. We both last year at the RRI symposium doing this and now making the next steps. You have to put it inside an overall picture. I will not touch this picture because I expect the experts have spoken about this. And Nakashima-san, together with Klaus, are working in the background. I would only, and this is my last slides, to touch one of the elements I have shown before at the beginning. 3 use cases, but when we're going into, you see here 11 use cases, for example, which we're touching in the Manufacturing X environment in the project Factory X. You see here the information update and change services, that what's exactly the use case, what I have done in detail a little bit before. You have seen the carbon footprint topic. You see here also where, let's say, a product passport, think about my example, is needed. And you have the foundation, like said before, and one topic as an example is for sure trust anchor, how we have trustness, how we are doing this, how we are handling this together. Many, many thanks, and it was a real pleasure to make the opening here. Hopefully I have given you some impression what we are doing, use cases, why we are doing this, and how we are doing this in an open, collaborative way, and really looking forward for the next steps. And yeah, I'm very optimistic that we really achieve a lot together. Many thanks, Nakashima. Many thanks to all of you.
Thank you. ハーン様、ありがとうございました。ですね、次の登壇講演者はですね、ドイツフランホーファー ISST ディレクターボリス・オットー先生です。講演タイトルはですね、Interoperability within and across data spaces ということですが、オットー先生はですね、ドイツからリモートでジョインしていただきます。オットー先生、Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you all well. Thanks for having me. Can you also hear me?
Yes, yes. So please, stage is yours. Please start your presentation.
Let me quickly share my slides and then I will start with my presentation. So let's, first of all, thanks for having me. And also, I think it's a good opportunity to, let's say, touch upon what Thomas Hahn just said. Because when we want to address, let's say, the challenges that we are confronted with on a global scale. What we need to put into place is cross-border data sharing. And then furthermore, we would also be required to achieve interoperability within, but also across data spaces. And I would like to use the next 20 minutes or so to elaborate a little bit on this. So what I prepared is basically 3 points that I would like to discuss with you. First of all, let me come back to the business rationale, the business case even for industrial data sharing, because data sharing itself and also data spaces are not an end in itself, but they are a means to achieve certain goals. And I would like to come back to that once more in order for all of us not to forget this. Then I would briefly outline a little bit how that also informs the establishment of common European data spaces, which are, of course, designed to foster data sharing and innovation from data within Europe. But I would also like to stress that that also goes beyond Europe. And which then brings us to the third point that I would like to touch upon, which is data space interoperability. If we start with a very important industry, I'm sure both in Europe, in particular in Germany, but not less in Japan, the automotive industry, then we can identify a couple of business drivers for industrial data sharing, which are here depicted on the left-hand side. There is, let's say, the transformation towards the circular economy. And in order, let's say, to also achieve new forms of mobility, for example, electric mobility, it is a necessity that we change our current production system from sequential value chains towards a circular economy, because it's a matter of fact that otherwise we would not have, let's say, enough resources and raw materials, for example, scarce earths, and also raw material for batteries, in order to fulfill the demand for electric mobility. So if we don't enter and embark into circular use of components and materials, we will not be able to fulfill the demands that are out there, let alone, let's say, of course, requirements when it comes to recycling and also avoidance of waste. A second big use case comes along with traceability and sustainability. And I should say that there is lots of discussion about the carbon footprint of products, which is often, let's say, driven by compliance reasons. But this is not the only motivation for making sure that we are able to report on a very detailed level carbon dioxide emissions that occur in the production and distribution of systems. But in contrast, or on top of that, it's also a customer demand. OEMs, so the brand owners in the automotive value chain, require their suppliers to be very specific and give them basically, carbon footprint intervals, so to say, windows for their particular components. And that requires suppliers to be able to calculate, not only on an average basis, but on a very detailed basis, the carbon footprint of a certain component, for example, a rain sensor, which is produced in plant A, for example, in Germany, or in plant B, for example, in Turkey. So that is a requirement not only by the law, but in fact also by the customer. And of course, there are traditional use cases like quality management. Still, enormous amounts of money are spent for recalls, which do not affect the entire batch, but only a couple of, let's say, individual products. But still, we need to recall huge batches, and most of them, let's say, not necessarily. By the way, those use cases on the left-hand side are not only important for the automotive industry, but touching a little bit upon what Thomas Hahn earlier said, they are pretty common through all throughout or across all manufacturing industries. So we have lots of scaling potential here because, as I said, they hold true not only for automotive, but more or less for all manufacturing industries. However, in the automotive industry, we have the specific situation that we have relatively complex products that we manufacture, and of course, still a very low vertical range of manufacturer in the case of the brand owners, the original equipment manufacturers. And I say that because it's clear when you are required to, let's say, collect detailed information about not only the car itself in this case, but all the individual components, and 75% of the components basically are supplied by your network, then it's clear that you have to team up, right? So you need to engage with the entire ecosystem, with the entire value network, in order to meet the demands in terms of providing the required information to embark into a circular economy or to report on sustainability issues, for example. What we have then done, we studied a little bit, let's say, the incentives and barriers of interorganizational data sharing. And there are a couple, let's say, you can basically also categorize them in terms of technical aspects, economic aspects, and also social aspects. And there are, of course, a number of things that companies want to achieve. For example, common standards and vocabularies. Also, let's say, the ambition to overcome data silos, not only within one company, but also between companies. And of course, and the eternal goal, so to say, to have improved and seamless processes. But on the other hand, there is a fear that there will be too many standards, for example. Another incentive is also to engage in, let's say, more in-depth business collaborations, which we have just seen, for example, in the circular economy. But a barrier might also be, let's say, integrating smaller and medium-sized companies. So there is, let's say, a large field of tangents when it comes to interorganizational data sharing. And I should say that, let's say, finding this balance between the benefits and also the risks on the one hand side, and also the interest of the individual company and of a value network as a whole is, let's say, what drives also, or what has driven, the development of the European data strategy. Talking about the European data strategy, I once more took, let's say, this quote here from Ursula von der Leyen when she started her first term. And also by then, it is now 4 years ago, she called for the establishment of common European data spaces, which are seen as the key or strategic instrument to foster cross-company data sharing, and in doing so, increasing the reuse of data, and in doing so, also making sure that the value of data can unfold. And I should say that in the current, you might have known that basically the election took place for the European Parliament, and we are having a new commission these days, and that the European data strategy is transformed into something which is coined the European Data Union. So it will even be, let's say, intensified in terms of making sure that data not only plays an important role as a resource in the European Union, but is more frequently shared for the better of individual companies, as I said, but also for the better of entire communities, value chains, and to a certain extent also the society. It is important to understand that the data strategy materializes in two streams mainly. On the left-hand side, we see, let's say, parts of the regulatory framework that had to be put into place. So it's basically defining the rules of the game when we talk about a fair data economy in Europe. But on the other hand, and this is what I'd like to stress right now in this talk, is, let's say, the call for interoperability And once more, the strategic means to achieve interoperability and reuse of data is common European data spaces. Why am I qualified, so to say, to speak about the European data strategy? Well, I have the privilege, the honor, and also the pleasure, I should say, to coordinate the European Data Spaces Support Center. And in that role, I'm also, I have an observer seat in the European Data Innovation Board, which is, let's say, why I might be able to reflect also on these kind of things. So coming, let's say, closer to also the core of, let's say, today's talk, if we translate this overall strategy into fundamental or essential requirements for the European data spaces, we would come to, let's say, two major aspects. First one is trust on the left-hand side, and trust materializes basically in trust between the participants of a data space. So you need to be able to trust the guy who is requesting your data, even though you haven't known him for, let's say, decades or so. And the other thing is that you trust, on the one hand side, in the data. So is the data free of rights of third parties that I'm getting through a data space? And on the other hand, also from the perspective of the data provider, trust that the data is not misused. And that is something that we also have seen in this little study that we conducted before. People want to prevent malevolent use of data to happen. So trust is one thing. And the second major requirement is interoperability. And what I try to do is to apply, let's say, within data spaces, and you can see here the footnote number 1, the so-called European Interoperability Framework to the various aspects of data spaces. This is, in my point of view, a quite, let's say, well, instrumental tool, functional tool, because it identifies 4 layers. The first layer is the legal layer, and, well, legal aspects within the European Union have been, let's say, sorted out through the regulatory framework, as I just mentioned, for example, the Data Act and the Data Governance Act. And when we talk, in order not to anticipate too much about, let's say, cross-data space interoperability or even cross-border data sharing, of course, we need to make sure that, let's say, also the regulatory frameworks match, which apply to the sharing of data. The second layer is then the organizational layer. And usually this is about, let's say, well, how certain processes have to be established within data spaces, what participants are allowed to do and according to which overarching rules. We have a couple of, let's say, frameworks in place, for example, from the Data Spaces Support Center, which I will touch upon later on, but also from the International Data Space Association, the so-called rule book. And I know that, let's say, there is close alignment between Japanese activities on the one hand side, and of course also European initiatives on the other hand. Then we come to, let's say, the third layer, which deals with semantic aspects of interoperability. And when we talk about data spaces, we need to make sure that interoperability on this level can be achieved with regard to the identities. So, well, we have different identity schemes in place. In Europe, we will be having very shortly eIDAS 2. If I'm not mistaken, I heard that there are similar activities going on in Japan. So we need to see whether these kind of schemas really map in order to make sure that international data sharing can be achieved. Also, we need to make sure that the claims that are connected to certain participants. So, well, my claim, for example, is that I store the data only in Europe, for example, or that I possess, let's say, a TSAC certificate, all these kind of things, that this articulation of claims is also interoperable and can be verified not only in one data space, but also in several data spaces. Then, of course, if I want to publish my data, we need to think of interoperability of the catalog schemas in order to store the metadata. We need to think of interoperability of usage and access conditions for the data, for the resulting data contracts, and of course for the shared data itself. And then, while semantic aspects are related to the meaning of the data, which is usually depicted in vocabularies or, let's say, semantic information models, we also need to achieve interoperability on, let's say, even more technical aspects when it comes to, let's say, protocols and data sharing specifications. And that must happen both within, but also across data spaces. I then also did the exercise to go through what happens really on two sides of a data sharing transaction, which is on the one hand side, the data rights holder, and on the other hand, the data user. I don't want to go through all the details, but just touch upon a couple of things, which basically depict the fundamental requirements when it comes to data sharing agreements. For example, the data rights holder must be free to grant rights or not. They must be able to publish their metadata and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, as mentioned earlier, the data user must be able to trust that the legal status of the data access, shared, and reused is clear. And also, let's say that the data provider really has a license to act on behalf of the data rights holder and so forth, and so on and so forth. This is also not only just a theoretical concept, but has been implemented, for example, in Catena X. And I should say that Catena X is not a project anymore. It's there, it's live. Companies use it for, let's say, business critical operations. So use cases are implemented with Catena X. And if they would be broken, then basically production would stop. So Catena X is at the heart of the automotive industry. It's live. And you can see here interoperability also depicted in the so-called governance model, which identifies so-called flight levels, which are pretty close to the the interoperability framework that I just introduced before. So we have this 30,000 feet view for, let's say, the overall governance framework, which also includes, let's say, regulatory aspects. And then it goes down to the specific data sharing layer. I talked about the blueprint for data spaces, which is elaborated and developed by the European Data Spaces Support Center. It's basically, well, a template that can be used for the creation and development of data spaces. It includes both technical building blocks, but also organizational and business building blocks. And I just came back. That is also the reason why I unfortunately can't be with you in face-to-face and presence. I just came back from one of the general meetings of the Data Spaces Support Center that we had in Belgium. And we stressed the fact of cross-data space interoperability. So the next version of the blueprint will also have a dedicated section for cross-data space interoperability. Yes, I should come to a couple of, let's say, very concrete activities that I want to make sure that you are aware of. There is an initiative in Europe under the umbrella of the CEN. So CEN stands for Centre Européen de Normalisation, which is basically the European Standardization Agency, where we define the fundamental requirements for a trusted data transaction as they are used, for example, in data spaces. And this is also what I referred to when I talked about semantic interoperability. You can see on the left-hand side these, let's say, couple of, let's say, life cycle stages of a data transaction between a data provider and a data user. And we need to make sure that interoperability can be achieved for all of the 6 life cycles. I think they are not very specific. They hold true not only for Europe, of course, but are very generic. So that's also the reason why I present it here. And when we, let's say, talk about, let's say, closer collaboration within the international manufacturing X environment, but also, let's say, when we talk about how to achieve, let's say, data sharing between Uranus, Catena, and other data spaces, for example, we need to address, let's say, these 6 life cycle stages at least. Yes. Let me also make you aware of some very important things when it comes to achieving standards for interoperability. So there is a lots of activities going on the specification side. For example, the IDSA Association published earlier this year the data space protocol in the first stable version. This has been taken up by the open source community under the Eclipse Foundation, and there are a lot of, let's say, members which represent individual companies, but also entire ecosystems, which basically join forces in order to develop, let's say, the software. And further on, we have then the opportunity, due to the fact that the Eclipse Foundation has a category A liaison with ISO, to bring that relatively quickly to an ISO standard. And we are currently working on the first standard of a standards family, which is AWI 2151, which lays the fundamentals for data space characteristics. And this will be then followed by the next standard in that family that basically makes the data space protocol an international standard. And I think this is something, and Thomas said that earlier on, where we all have to work together, because the challenges that we are confronted with are ones that can't be solved in Europe or Japan only, but that require a collaboration on a global scale. Yes, perhaps a couple of, let's say, final thoughts about different ways to achieve inter-data space interoperability. So I think we can, in general, identify three patterns. So we could, on the left-hand side, leave it a little bit to the individual participants, if you may. So assuming, let's say, these icons here depict two data spaces, and you have a couple of, let's say, participants in each of those. You can basically, just leave it, as I said, up to the participants to walk through these four layers, legal, org, semantic, technical, to sort it out by themselves. This is probably not the, let's say, the best and the most, let's say, smooth way, but there may be options where this is suitable. Then we have, let's say, overlapping data spaces where the interoperability task, I should say, could be done by intermediaries. So service providers like, for example, Cofinity X in the case of Catena, but also others, Fujitsu, for example, with whom we collaborate on matters in order to make sure that, let's say, the interoperability task is, let's say, done by one for all. And we could also imagine a third pattern where we do not necessarily have two separated data spaces, but rather something which is nested. And I should say that this model is closest to the original definition of a data space, which basically did not know, let's say, a definite boundary of a data space. So assuming that we have, let's say, a higher order data space, which defines, for example, the organizational interoperability framework and also the legal framework, and gives specifications also on the semantic level, this could just be, let's say, inherited by smaller sub-data spaces in this overarching data space. I'm not so sure whether that fits basically, let's say, in our case, but at least that is something which is very closely related to this idea of common European data spaces, because we have in Europe a number of, let's say, individual data space activities in one domain, for example, mobility, and they eventually need to form altogether an overarching European mobility data space. I also know that there are discussions around, how many Catenas should there be? Since I'm also in the board of directors of Catena X, I believe the best way is that there is only one Catena, but there will probably be more, let's say, individual instantiations when it comes to certain services, which then all follow, let's say, the overarching Catena rules, if you may. So this is, I think, something that will also be touched upon in International Manufacturing X. And I think Thomas said that, Thomas, you said you were very proud that this is now in place. And I can say I would like to support this because this is really a great opportunity for all of us, because we have a platform, a collaboration format where we can drive these things further. And I can say that I'm very glad and very happy to be part of this initiative. And I'm looking very much forward to the next steps in, let's say, collaborating with all of you. And I hope you received a couple of, let's say, fresh ideas through my presentation. And I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. オットー先生、ありがとうございました。オットー先生にはですね、この後パネルディスカッションにもご参加いただきますので、カメラ、ネットワークとカメラオンのままでお願いいたします。はい、次の講演者、RRI WG1 の共同主査であり、日立製作所のシニアストラテジストである入江様にお願いしております。講演タイトルは RRI における産業データ連携ユースケース検討ということになります。それでは入江様、よろしくお願いいたします。
はい、ただいまご紹介に預かりました、RRI ワーキンググループ1共同主査で日立の、シニアストラテジストやっております入江と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。本日昨年度 RRI で行いましたデータスペースのユースケースの検討状況、それからそれに関わる国内の状況について、皆さんと共有して、今後本当に国際的にどう、進めていくかみたいなところを、ぜひ議論今後していきたいと思っています。よろしくお願いします。まずRRI の、組織です。ただ、この上の方はちょっと省略して、下の方を見ていただければ分かるんですけども、RRI の中に、ワーキンググループ3つあります。で、そのワージン1が IoT に関わるところですけど、その中にアクショングループが今4つあります。で、そのアクショングループ4というのが昨年度できまして、これが、データスペースに関わる、産業データ連携に関わるアクショングループになっております。東大の、近藤先生に、リードいただいております。で、この下に、タスクフォースが、全部で4つあります。で、1番目が、これが先ほど来いろいろと発表いただいてます、カテナ X、あるいはファクトリー X、こういったところの、ある意味、サーベイ、それから、これを国内にどうやってプロモーションしていくかみたいなところのウェビナーを多数開催させていただきました。それからタスク2、これが今日の主題ですけども、ユースケースの検討というところ。それからタスク3、これは東大の木村先生にリードいただき、データ連携が今後のエンジニアリングにどういうふうに影響するか、そういったテクニカルな検討をしていただき、でタスク4が、これが今年度スタートしてますけども、NTT コムの坂井野さんにリードいただき、社内外とのコミュニケーション図ってもらうということでやっております。でこのタスク2の中でユースケースを議論してきたその内容をちょっとご紹介したいと思います。大きくすみません、その前にどういったメンバーでディスカッションしたかといいますと、まずユースケースに関わるようなユーザーサイド、ユーザー企業の視点での参加ということと、もう一つ今度プラットフォームを構築する側という視点での参加、それからそれを広く見ておられるコンサルティングの方、それからグリーン×デジタルコンソーシアムという、これCO2 の算出のルール作りやられてますけど、こういったところに参加いただき全部で24名の方に参加いただきました。で進め方なんですけども、これ昨年の国際シンポジウムでもこのフレームちょっと紹介させていただきましたけど、まずデータスペースをユースケース考える上での共通ゴールって何だろうということを議論しました。でただじゃあどういったところを目標にしようねっていう中で、でもデータスペースを使う時のやっぱり今度懸念点っていうのもあって、先ほどオット先生の発表の中にもありましたけども、そういった懸念点って何だろうということを洗ってみようと。でそういったことを総合して、じゃあユースケース、我々が目指すべきユースケースってどういったことがあるかといったステップで検討してまいりました。でこのステップ1でその共通ゴールなんだろうということを議論してきました。でこの共通ゴールでの議論で見えてきたのは、大きくそのゴールって2つあるよねと。1つはやはり社会課題を解決するっていう、本当に企業間で共通の目的っていう話と、 もう一つはそうは言っても企業で、やるからには企業のメリット、先ほどOtto先生の話でインセンティブっていう話ありましたけど、この企業から見たインセンティブって何だろうみたいな話があって、でそれをそれぞれ5つ抽出しました。上からいきますと、脱炭素、それから循環社会、それから安心安全レジリエント、それから国際連携協調、それから5番目が人に優しい社会、この5つですと。で右側、今度、企業価値の向上につきましては、これも5つ、ピックアップして、1つはやっぱり企業の中の生産性向上ですとか、コスト削減、これが1番目。で2番目が、製品そのものの競争力の維持向上。で3番目が、企業の時価総額、企業価値の向上。で4番目が、企業の社会的責任を果たすこと。で5番目が、新しい市場を創生すること。でこの、社会課題を解決することと企業の価値を高めることっていうのは、両立するかもしれないし相反するかもしれないっていう、そういった話があって、これをどうやって両立させるように持っていくかっていうところが課題かなということで、それを今度、企業の中でドライブするだけではなくて、その外にいる、人たちのドライブ、例えばエンドユーザーであったり、株主であったり、業界であったり国であったり、あるいは世界全体であったり、こういったところがどうやってドライブしていくかというところが気になるだろうというディスカッションをしました。それから、じゃあ、ステップ2で今度データスペースを使う、特にユーザー企業サイドから見たときの懸念点っていうのをやっぱり、あるよねというところで挙げました。これちょっと詳細全部でですね、24個全部でピックアップしまして、で、ただそのデータスペースそのもの、この真ん中にあるデータスペースそのものだけではなくて、これも先ほどOtto先生の話にありましたね、データを持ってる側、あるいはデータをプロバイドする側のコンサーンもあるし、今度データを使う側のコンサーンもあるし、それぞれのそのプレイヤーによってコンサーンっていろいろとあるかなと。で共通してやはりここの中でルールですとか標準化ですとか認証ですとか、あるいはツールですとか、そういったところがこれの解決に役立つんじゃないかみたいな話をさせていただきました。でこういった議論を進めてユースケースのどういったユースケースがあり得るかという議論をしました。でこの左側に示してますこの表が全部で、これ各メンバーの方から募って全部で16個のユースケースの素案を出していただきました。でこれを見ると結構オーバーラップしてたりするので、これをグルーピングして大くくりで4つのユースケースという形でまとめました。でその考え方ですけど、これこの右側に書いてますように横軸がこれ若干 IMX の一番上のレイヤーから拾ってるところあるんですけども、サステナビリティだったりレジリエンスだったりっていう、どっちかっていうとそのネガティブな部分をどうやってゼロにしていくかっていうようなそういった話。それからさらに今度、イノベーション、IMXS とコンペティティブネスっていう話だったと思いますけれども、そういった次のそのゼロからプラスの価値を、生むみたいな、そういったところの軸があるんじゃなかろうかと。でもう一つこの縦軸に書いてますのが、どういったデータをシェアすべきかっていう観点で挙げてます。一つはやはりプロダクトに紐づくデータっていうのをシェアする、流通させるっていう話と、もう一つは企業の活動に対するデータをシェアする、共有する、流通させる、そういった、大きくくくるとそういうことかなと思って、その、軸でこう分けたときに、グループ1、2、3、4というこの4つのユースケースを、ピックアップしました。でこれもう多分すごくフォントが小さくて申し訳ないんですけども、その、サマリーを、示したのがこの、表になります。縦軸が先ほどの4つのユースケースになっておりまして、それぞれ概要の説明、それから先ほど話してますように、どういう価値を、コモンゴールどうするか、それ社会あるいは環境価値どういったところを目指すのか、あるいは企業価値何を高めるのか、そういったところをピックアップいただき、でじゃあ、これをドライブするステークホルダーって一体誰だろうねみたいなところ、それから、じゃあどういうデータを流通させるべきか、データスペース上で流通させるべきかと いったそういったまとめを、しました。でこれちょっとさすがにこの表全部説明できないので、ちょっとかいつまんで一個一個説明したいと思います。まずユースケースの1番目、これはESG の指標、製品に関わる ESG の指標をどうやって流通するかという中でいろんなそのサプライチェーンの中で、例えばその CO2 の排出量、カーボンフットプリントを流通させて、で最終的にエンドプロダクトのマニファクチャー製造者がこの情報を公開してエンドユーザー向け、あるいはその投資家向け、あるいはその規制当局ですねにちゃんとディスクローズするっていう、そういったユースケースがあるんじゃなかろうかと。これによって脱炭素社会を目指そうっていう話と、企業にとってはその製品競争力の維持向上につながるといった、こういったことを考えました。で2番目が品質情報に関するトレーサビリティです。いろんなもう製品どんどん複雑になってます。その中でいろんなエンジニアリングの情報をシェアする。例えば今課題になってますのはプロダクトに関わるサイバーアタック、ここはちょっと課題になっていて、その時の脆弱性ですとか、あるいはソフト構成がどうなっているかみたいな話をシェアする、流通させる。そうすることによって最終的な例えばその非常に重要な、例えば飛行機ですとか、あるいは社会インフラに関わるようなプロダクトですとか、そういったところに対してきちんと脆弱性が管理できる、あるいは何かインシデントが起きたときに対応できるといったそういったユースケースを考えました。価値からするとその安心安全レジリエントプラスその企業の社会的責任を果たす、こういったところが価値になるんじゃないかという話です。で3番目が企業間のリソースシェアリングということで、これ企業がいろいろと製造するにあたってはいろんなやっぱりリソースが必要になります。この例でいくと、例えば物流に関わる話ですとか、あるいはエネルギー、特に最近ですと脱炭素に向けてグリーンエネルギーをどうやって調達するかってすごく問題になってるんですけど、そういった情報をどのくらい必要でじゃあどのくらいシェアできるかっていうような、そういった情報をデータスペースの中でやり取りすることで企業のコスト削減、あるいはそのレジリエンスの向上、こういったところにつながるんじゃなかろうかというふうに思っています。で、4番目が循環経済です。これはどちらかというと、もちろんサステナビリティにも関わるんですけども、どちらかというと新しい市場をどんどん作れるんじゃなかろうかということで、単に製造業だけではなくて、いわゆる静脈側ですねも含めて新しいその経済圏を作って、その中で成長を遂げるような、じゃあそのために必要となる情報ってもさまざまなものが必要で、どういった部品から構成されていて、どういった分解する手立てがあって、でどういうふうな使われ方をしてみたいなところが上流からどんどんシェアされ、最終的にこれをリユースする、リサイクルするっていったところのプレイヤーと共有して循環経済を作っていく。そのためにそうすることで循環経済とそれから新しい市場を創生できる、こういったところにつながるんじゃなかろうかと思っています。で以上4つのユースケースをピックアップした中で、ただやっぱり振り返ってみたときにこれ本当にできるんだっけっていうようなやっぱり問いがあり、じゃあこの特にユースケースの1番目ですね、 ESG の情報をシェアする、例えば先ほど来ありますバッテリーパスポートですとか DPP ですとか、そういったところをちょっと念頭に置いたときに、どういう我々が本当にやらなければならないことっていうのがあるかっていうのをピックアップしました。でその構造としてまず整理したのがこれで、データスペースに関わることもそうですけども、そこのデータスペースに参加するユーザー企業のいろんな機能も必要だし、でこれをサポートするいわゆるトラスト基盤みたいな、そういったところが必要で、この3つの観点で本当に我々のチャレンジっていうのを整理しました。でデータスペースに関わる話としては、その国際的なルール形成であったり、 標準化だったり、あるいは国際的なその相互、接続性、インターオペラビリティの確保であったり、あとその運用は今度それぞれのやっぱデータスペースでやらなきゃいけないんですけども、それの整備であったり、あとその中のその、流通するためのデータのモデル、あるいはそのオントロジーの整備、こういったところは本当にデータスペースそのものに関わることだと思ってます。でこの右側ですね、今度ユーザー企業にとってもこれって非常にやっぱりいろんなことを考えねばならず、社内データどうやって、きちんと整理していくかっていうところって結構日本の企業はこれ結構重要な課題だと思ってます。それから実際にその、データをこう開示するためにはいろんな多分標準だとか信頼性だとかそういったところをクリアしなきゃいけない、そのための準備をどうしていくか、そのためのデータ管理をどうしていくかというところが重要です。それから何よりもこのデータスペースに参加しようねみたいなそういったマインド醸成っていうのも極めて重要な課題になっています。それからこの左下ですね、いわゆるこう、データスペースに参加するためには非常にそのトラストっていうのは重要です。でそのデータ自分の企業が本当にこの、データスペースに参加していいよっていうようなそういった基盤を作るっていうことは欧州では進んでますけども国内ではなかなかっていうところでここをどうしていくか。それからその本当データそのもののトラストをどうしていくか、こういったところのこう基盤整備っていうのが重要であると、こういったその、課題の抽出まで実施しました。でこれが昨年度の、検討結果です。でこれを、RRI としましてはこの左側に書いてますように、レポートとして、8月に、発行させていただきました。あとこの議論につきましては本当に当初の頃から経済産業省の方にも入っていただき、今年の5月に、発行された、経済産業省のものづくり白書ですね、この中に、記載いただいてます。この右側に書いてますように、共通ゴールの話であったりユースケースみたいなところが、ものづくり白書にも、参照されております。でこういったこう流れの中で、もちろん国内においてはバッテリーパスポートをターゲットにウラノスでエコシステムが今も本当にローンチされてますけども、これを本当に国際的にどうしていくか、あるいはユースケースをどう広げていくかっていう中で、やはりその官民の連携って極めて重要であろうということで、この議論を今年度経団連の中で検討委員会発足していただき、RRI のメンバーとしても、私と坂井野さん、参加し、提言書、作成しました。これが、今週ですね、10月の15日に、発行され、その、中に、RRI の先ほど申し上げたような話っていうのがちょっと盛り込まれているということで、これをちょっと最後ご紹介しますけども、やはりその産業データスペースの構築そのものだけではなくて、特に国内においては、それを本当に支えるためのトラスト基盤っていうのが、重要であろうということ、それから先ほど来ハンさんオット先生からもありますように、本当にインターオペラビリティ、国際的なインターオペラビリティをどう図っていくかっていうところが極めて重要で、こういったところをどう官民連携でやっていくか。でもう一つはそのユーザー企業をどんどん巻き込むためのその本当に魅力的なユースケースをどう作っていくか、こういったところがある種の提言の骨子になってまして、これを本当に官民で一体となってちょっと考えていこうという提言をまとめさせていただき、でこれをベースにいろいろと今この議論する枠組みが今形成されつつあるということで、これが最後のスライドにはなりますけども、今日お集まりの皆さん、あるいは本当に今日本当にドイツから参加されている方々と本当に国際的な相互連携、あるいはそれでどういう価値を生み出していくかということをぜひ継続的に議論させていただければというふうに思ってございます。はい、入れから発表以上でございます。
ありがとうございました。入江様ありがとうございました。それでは引き続きですね、パネルディスカッションに入りたいと思います。オット先生はリモートでご参加をお願いいたします。ですね、パネルはですね、シュナイダー様とあと入江様にも参加いただきますので、前の方に出ていただいて、ご着席ください。私ここはいはい。 それではですね、1時まで時間がございますので、スタートしたいと思います。スライドをちょっと表示いただけますでしょうか。あらかじめですね、今日の、資料に沿った形といいますか、で、いくつか設問といいますか、流れを作っておきました。あとですね、会場の方からもスライドのところに質問いただいてますので、うまく取り混ぜながらですね、進めていきたいと思います。次のスライドお願いいたします。ですね、ごめんなさい、これに入る前にですね、まず登壇といいますか、パネリストの方々ご紹介したいと思います。まず最初はフランホーファー ISST のオットー先生となります。よろしくお願いいたします。それとですね、日立製作所 WG1 の共同主催やられている入江様、それとですね、あとパネルにご参加ということで DMG MORIのシュナイダー様、セバスチャン・スナイダー様にもご参加いただいております。シュナイダー様にはですね、後で自己紹介も簡単にしていただいた方がいいかなと思います。あとモデレーターは私RRI の中島が務めさせていただきますのでよろしくお願いいたします。はい、じゃあまずはシュナイダー様、ちょっと簡単に自己紹介をお願いいただけますでしょうか。
Yes, thank you very much for having me. My name is Sebastian Schneider. I'm since 15 years at DMG MORI in Germany and therefore responsible for the R&D projects. And one very important project is Manufacturing X or Factory X, and I'm responsible for this project.
ありがとうございます。それではですね、パネルに入っていきたいと思います。今日はですね、5つほど大きなトピックということで用意しています。特にですね、今回セッション1の中ではですね、ドイツですとかヨーロッパの取り組みについてご紹介いただきましたので、1番と2番はですね、どちらかというとヨーロッパあるいはドイツの動きをもう少し理解していきましょうということで作っております。で、3番目はじゃあ日本はどうでしたっけというお話。それと4番目はじゃあ、日独というだけではなくてですね、グローバルに広がっていくところをどう考えていきましょうかという話と、最後はまとめということで、進めていきたいと思います。そうしましたらですね、まず最初の質問に移りたいと思います。これ順番にちょっと進めていきたいと思いますが、カテナ X では、これはセバスチャンさん、シュナイダーさんにちょっとご質問させていただきたいと思っておるんですが、カテナ X では自動車 OEM っていうのが、強力な、ちょっとこれ字間違えてますね、強力というのはパワフルなという意味ですけれども、すごく大きな牽引力を持ってたと思うんですが、ファクトリー X というのはどうなんでしょうか。誰かストロングなその牽引役というのがいるんでしょうか、それとももっと違った形で進められてるんでしょうかというのが最初の質問になります。
So in Factory X we have 46 companies involved. There are the two main important software companies, Siemens and SAP. Then we have two machine tool builders, Trumpf and DMG MORI, and we have a lot of, let's say, other participants like suppliers of us. EFM is a sensor specialist, Festo, for example, and others. And also we have then some smaller software companies and also some research companies involved. And maybe to add, so all of them have not only one role, but maybe further roles. So some of them have also the role as a, let's say, company or factory operator. So, for example, Siemens has also some machines from us, and there we can also implement our new products.
ありがとうございます。そうすると業界全体でその製造の考え方というかあり方がどんどん変わっていく、そういうのに取り組んでいくというような形と理解いたしました。もう一つ、シュナイダーさんにご質問させていただいたんですが、先ほどハーンさんのスライドの中でもユースケース、ファクトリー X のユースケース11個というふうに示してあるんですけれども、11個いきなりバーッとやるというよりはおそらくいろんなこれが大事だよねというユースケースっていうのがあるかと思うんですが、そういったものはどれが あの中で一番やっぱり注目のユースケースあるいはプライオリティの高いユースケース、となってるんでしょうかというのがまず一つの質問と、それをやっていくことで製造という製造業というのがどういうふうに変わっていくかというどういうその考え方のもとでやられているのか教えていただきたいと思います。
Okay. So, of course, we have these 11 use cases. We have also the categories, and I like the idea that also you showed before, this also the categories in Japan, that they are quite similar to that, and maybe to do it in, or to use these categories. So first topic, and I think that was also the topic which Thomas-san and also Dr. Iri showed, the topic of sustainability and energy management. So of course, we have the topic of product carbon footprint. That's also relevant for us. But the other way around, we as a machine tool builder have also the responsibility regarding energy management. So the energy or taking some measures to reduce the energy consumption of the machine tools. And there we have also possibilities with data exchange to reduce the energy consumption. Mm-hmm. And so this is also quite important. And I think you asked how this will change the manufacturing process. So with exchanging data, it's possible to reduce maybe also some energy consumption and also to adapt. You showed before this, let's say, the resources and the adoption of the resources. There you can also adapt then the energy consumption, for example, and this is also possible with data exchange. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe one topic. Second very important topic is a topic regarding competitiveness of our companies, of our customers. So when we want to improve our machines must run more hours during the year. And therefore, it's necessary that we have an autonomous operation as a service. And so that's one of the use cases which is very crucial for us to provide measures how to, let's say, make the machines run more hours a year, and that our customers can, let's say, produce more and earn more money with it. That's second topic. Then third topic, also what you showed before a little bit, like traceability, is also very important. Actually, a lot of our customers are in aerospace, and we are also involved in Aerospace X because there we can also then, let's say, develop the use cases for them. And one very important topic in aerospace is the topic of traceability. So in Catena X, there's always the example traceability of the parts, and if you have then a wrong part, then how to get all the affected cars. And also in aerospace, same topic. So if there is any error, how to make sure what was the reason for it and how was the process conditions. And therefore, traceability is a very critical part and or very critical topic. And that's also one of the, let's say, use cases which is very, very relevant for us. Further topic is then maybe also condition monitoring-led service. That's also from, let's say, the amount of money and also participants involved. One of the biggest use cases, because at the moment it's like this, that we can, of course, have the overview on the machine, how is the status of any kind of machine. But with data exchange, we can improve the service much more, and we can then also sell the customer much more new service models to increase the availability of the machine.
ありがとうございます。ですね、会場からですね、質問が来てますので、ファクトリー X のユースケースのことで一つ、質問させていただきたいと思います。これ確か、ハンさんのユースケースの説明の中にDPP という、11個ある中で DPP というインディケーションがあったかと思うんですけれども、こういうそのユースケースの検討を進めていって、その後にその なんていうんですか、どういうアプローチをしていくかというところというのが業界でこう共有していくことになろうかと思うんですけど、そういうものは何かしらのその、ドキュメントというかガイドラインというか、そういうものを作っていかれるんでしょうか。
Well, at the moment, we don't have the guideline. We are developing it right now regarding the data exchange. So that's at the moment in development. But of course, at the end, there will be some guideline coming out of that.
多分、DPP をその、DPP の仕組みを使っていく時にどういうふうにやっていくかというのはおそらく日本の企業の人たちもとても興味があると思いますので、そういったものがお互いに共有できたら素晴らしいかなと思っております。はい、ではですね、次にどんどん質問を進めていきたいと思います。ですね、この今ユースケースの話ちょっと触れたんですけれども、こういうユースケースをやっていくときにデータスペースに多くの企業がやっぱりこう参加していかなくてはいけない、つまり多くの企業が共感していくということがとても大事だと思うんですけれども、そういうふうに広げていく、その共感をその産業界に広めていくというのは、例えばヨーロッパの場合はどういった努力をされているのかというのをですね、セバスチャンさんとあとオット先生にもお伺いしたいと思います。
So within the project Factory X, we call it customer sound sports. So that's the possibility that we show all our customers how is the actual status, how are the use cases, and what could be the benefit for them. And that's what we show them within these customer soundboards. And then, of course, later on, there is also the possibility that they can participate then within the project, let's say, as application companies. So this is the first step of integration of customers. Second step of integration, I think you saw it in the slides at the beginning from Hahn. There was this, let's say, the transfer and scale MX. So we are starting a big project called Scale MX, which is focusing on the transfer to SMEs, and then that's the next step to how to transfer all the new products, all the new ideas in the, let's say, in all the companies, in all the SMEs.
はい、ありがとうございます。オット先生いかがでしょうか。一番下の3番目の質問に関してですが、ご意見いただければありがたいです。
Yes. Yeah, that's of course a very important question that is also very close to my heart. Let me give three points, or let me answer with 3 points to this question. First of all, we are talking about ecosystems, and in ecosystems we need to acknowledge the fact that network effects apply. That means the more participants we have for a data space and a data ecosystem, the greater is the value for all the individual participants. So therefore we must have an interest to scale as much as possible. Second thing, in order to reach that, what we need to do is to lower the entry barriers for every individual participant as much as we can. And that is also something that we have learned in Catena X to, as I said, make the onboarding process as quick as possible and as easy as possible. So it should be no burden for a company to join a data space. And also, we must, let's say, offer directly from joining first value, business value for the participants. And that is something which I believe will come, for example, through very basic data services, for example, around master data, but also I think around things that everybody needs to address, for example, DPP. The third aspect that I would like to stress to this question goes back to what Irie-san also said, which is the internal readiness of companies. So the internal data management capability of the organizations, of the companies, must improve in order to be ready to be connected to a data space. To be honest, I think this is the biggest challenge because I have been, let's say, working on this field for 25 years. We made great progress, I should say, but there is still many things to be done, I must say. So 3 things: network effects on ecosystem level, direct business benefit, low entry barriers for every single participant, and number 3, increasing maturity of internal data management capabilities.
はい、ありがとうございます。非常に本質といいますか、重いポイントをついていただいたと思います。次のスライドにお願いします。ここではですね、レディネス、今もレディネスの話ありました、あとチャレンジ、あるいはソリューションオブカンパニーズインヨーロッパということですけれども、ご質問いただいている中にも多分似てるものがあるんですが、まずここの3番目ということで書いてある上の方の質問ですね。日本企業は欧州企業ほど産業データ連携に対する投資やリスクの判断が進んでないようです。これはちょっと言い過ぎかもしれないですけれども、企業がこういう産業データ連携を活用していこうというところに向けてですね、投資やリスクの判断しながらどんどん加わっていくっていうのはですね、欧州ではどういうふうにこれを皆さん進んで入っていっているのかというところをですね、これはシュナイダーさんとオットー先生、もう一度これについてコメントなりヒントをいただければと思います。
Yes, of course. So maybe the first thing is, I think that, or the lessons learned from the previous projects was that before we always developed the solutions for ourselves, and now that's the answer in Factory X and Manufacturing X. We need, let's say, a strong collaboration of all companies. So as Thomas mentioned before, we cannot do that by ourselves, and I think that's one of the most important things and lessons learned, and I think that's mostly the most important thing. And then maybe also what we also need to do, I think we need easy solutions at the beginning. You see that also in Catena X. I think the easy solutions which all of the users are, all of the companies are using, that's what we should start with, and then we can maybe also integrate them later on more complex solutions.
ありがとうございます。オットー先生いかがでしょうか。
Yeah, I think there are 2 major drivers. And once more, it's not an end in itself. So we do not engage in data sharing because we have nothing else to do. But it's, let's say, something that helps companies to, let's say, increase their competitive position, right? So be more competitive and also sustain their competitive advantage. As Sebastian also said, in many cases, companies realize that it's better to team up with others because, for example, also again in Catena, they realized that it was just too expensive if everybody would try to implement a data sharing platform by themselves. And they would never have, let's say, achieved the adoption in the value chain that would have been needed to be successful. So sharing a burden together addressing a challenge is one of the key drivers. The other fundamental driver is innovation. For example, there is a very interesting ecosystem called GDSO. It's basically around the tire industry. So basically, well, tires for cars and let's say large excavators and so on and so forth, where also European, but also many Japanese companies are involved. And they teamed up in order to, well, seize the innovation potential that comes out of, let's say, sharing data across the entire life cycle of a tire, right? So innovation is a key driver for teaming up in data ecosystems. Of course, it's always easier to start with the cost side, but I think the biggest potential is as we go, then more towards, let's say, innovative business scenarios. And we touched upon another very important one, which is circular economy. And I personally think that this is, let's say, a direction that in particular European, but I guess also Japanese should go because, well, that's a huge innovation potential for us to seize.
はい、ありがとうございます。ここの、スライドではもう一つ質問を、設けています。下の方の質問になりますけれども、データスペースの話をするとですね、我々どちらかというとこう仕組みといいますかシステムの方の話を、してしまうんですが、今日もご指摘がすでにあったんですが、こう使う側ですね、企業の方が本当にレディーなんでしたっけっていうところが非常に、先ほどもですね、大きな問題だよねというご指摘がございました。例えばですね、欧州で、カテナ X ですとかもう始まったよというお話もありましたけれども、じゃあ使う側の企業としてどれほどその、レディーになっているのか、これ一言で言うのはなかなか表現難しいと思うんですけれども、SME 含めていろんな企業がすぐポンと使えるような状態、その企業の状態がそういうところに行っているのか、あるいはまだまだ、企業側でも努力をしていく必要があるかとか、そのあたりをですね、どういうふうにご評価されているかというのをですね、教えていただければと思います。これもセバスチャンさんとオット先生に一言ずついただければと思います。
Okay, so first thing was, I think the answer was already in the question before. The question, let's say, that we analyzed and said that we can only make it together. Second topic is, I addressed it a little bit before, let's say the kind of use cases. So we had a lot of applications before as digital products, which were, let's say, not so directly related to machine tools and the manufacturing process. And that's why we had a lot of effort for creating this kind of solutions, but the benefit was not that high. And I think that's also something, that's what I mentioned before, when we need use cases which a lot of customers can easily need and can easily use. And I think which are more related to the manufacturing process itself. So that's why I said condition monitoring-led services. We have a lot of machines with a lot of sensors inside which we can use, and that's why we, for example, use this as an example or use this as a use case to take their benefit for our customers.
ありがとうございます。オット先生いかがでしょうか。
Yeah, I think it is what we also discussed earlier, very important that companies, let's say, continue to improve their data management capability in the company. So if we talk about that data is a strategic resource, then we also manage data as such. And once more, we have, let's say, improved a lot over the last 20, 25 years, but I think there is still room for improvement. To give you a very concrete example, I think one of the key capabilities within a company is a comprehensive data catalog, which basically is an inventory of all the data resources that I have in a company, which comprises, let's say, technical aspects like, okay, where's the data source and through which API is it accessible and so on and so forth. It also has, let's say, a business aspect. Well, who's responsible? Who's the business owner for this kind of data sources? And of course, a legal aspect. Under which conditions am I allowed to share this data with whom? And so on and so forth. And this capability needs to be established in all companies in order to be ready to efficiently participate in a data space. If I don't have that, I will have no fun in participating in data ecosystems. So this is really critical. A last point on this. This is not only something that comes along with data spaces. Data spaces and data ecosystems are just a trigger to improve. As we learned from Sebastian Schneider and also Thomas Hahn and other speakers, there are so many challenges that a company has to address and so many opportunities to seize, which simply require, let's say, the further development and maturing of the data management capability. So you have to do it anyway. But yeah, let's say, pay attention to that and make yourself ready, shortly do the homework, so to say, in order to be a part of a data ecosystem.
ありがとうございます。そうすると、そういう必要性というのはヨーロッパの中でも認識されつつあるというふうに理解したんですが、それはもうかなりできてるよというレベルなのか、それともヨーロッパの企業もさらなる努力が必要ですねという、そのあたりはオットー先生いかがでしょうか。
Yes, a couple of years ago, we conducted a survey among the German companies. And this survey was thankfully supported by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs. And that showed that on a maturity model, which consists of maturity levels from 0, which is the lowest level, to 5, which is the highest level, that 80%, 80, assess themselves on the 2 lowest levels. And that was, of course, eye-opening. I think this has to be put into context. This study was conducted 4 years ago or even 5, so the situation has improved. And in this 80%, the majority of the companies were really small and micro companies. However, those are important because in our value chains, if I go to the second or third tier of the value chain, I very quickly end up with very small companies who, for example, do a certain, metal sheet processing for, I don't know, a car engine or something. So we need to address these small companies and make them ready. That must be one of the paramount actions in order to make data ecosystems successful. And what Sebastian Schneider said, the scaling initiative in Manufacturing X will support that very much. We also have, other, initiatives already established, like Transfer X, for example, which basically educates and supports individual companies in increasing their readiness. But this must be our top priority, and I'm sure that the situation in other, highly developed economies is similar, as I just referred to as in Germany. But this is something that we need to do. And perhaps a last comment, this is also an opportunity, because if we play it right, then data ecosystem could just, offer some sort of outsourcing opportunity for small companies for their data management. So they can just do their data management, in fact, in the end, through a data ecosystem and not have to care about it on their own, I think. And because that is a big opportunity, because if we go from one to the next and try to do the integration, that will just take too long. I think we need to offer new cool data management services to reach, to create the broad adoption and reach out to all these micro companies that are out there. Yeah.
はい、ありがとうございます。とってもよく状況が分かりました。はい、次のちょっと質問に移っていきたいと思います。次はですね、日本についてということです。これは入江さんにご質問させていただきたいんですが、日本でも裏のエコシステムなど取り組みが加速してますが、国内の状況をざっくりと教えていただきたい、というのと、企業の意識とか今後の注力ユースケース、またあと先ほども経団連の提言というような話がございましたけど、今後どういう動きが出てくるのであろうかといったあたりをですね、ご紹介いただければと思います。
はい、まず国内の状況、すべて私が把握できているわけでもなく、裏のエコシステムに関して私自身が語るっていうのもなかなか難しいんですけども、裏のエコシステムは先ほど発表させていただきましたように、やはりバッテリーパスポートを中心に、自動車業界の中で、ローンチ、しているという状況ですと。なので、そういったもう事例が出つつある中で、やはりこれをどういうふうに国際連携、あるいはそのユースケースの拡充、こういったところを進めていくかっていうところが、やはり全体的な課題感かなというふうに思ってます。その中でやはり欧州、特にドイツの取り組みってすごくやはり組織的に、あるいはすごくブロードにいろんなことを同時で考えていて、いろんなルール形成だとか標準化だとか、プラットフォームの形成だとかってやられてるんですけど、国内においてはちょっとこれ私の試験にはなりますけど、やはりカチッとしたユースケースがないとなかなか動かないみたいなところはあるのかなというところで、じゃあ本当にどういうユースケースを目指して国内の中でこういった機運を高めていくかっていうのを、まさに本当にこれから関係する省庁、あるいは経団連の中、あるいは RRI の中で議論を盛り上げていき、これを集約する形で、じゃあ国内でどうしていくかっていうところをうまく合意形成できればなというふうに思っています。そういう意味においては今週のその経団連の提言っていうのは一つの良いきっかけになりましたし、この経団連の提言のにおいてもいろんな企業の方、10社以上の方に参加いただいて提言まとめております。こういった提言を本当に議論する中でも、どういったユースケースが本当にあるのかとか、どういった課題があるのかっていう議論をさせていただいておりますので、そういったところを議論のベースにしつつ、今後の本当に国際連携、含めた検討ができればなというふうに思っています。以上です。
はい、ありがとうございます。だんだん時間がなくなってきましたので、先に進めたいと思います。4番目はですね、これまでドイツと日本の話させていただきましたけれども、国際グローバルの連携に向けてということで、これはですね、シュナイダーさんとオット先生に再びお話を伺いたいと思います。まずインターナショナルマニュファクチャリング X ですね、これ IMX とここでは書いてますけれども、グローバルでのその製造データスペースの広がり、あるいは総合運用性の確保のための取り組みというのを始めているというふうに理解しています。同時にその地域ごとにそのビジネスのやり方とか企業のレディネス、先ほどもレディネスの話ありました。あるいはそのデータスペースの考え方っていうのは、グローバルで見るとそれぞれの地域ごとにやっぱり違うのではないかなと思ってまして、そういったことをですね、今後のグローバルでのそのインターオペラビリティ確保していくときにどういう視点でその多様性といいますかに向き合っていくというかアプローチしていくのかというあたりをですね、お考えをお聞かせいただければと思います。
So I think the study from Kaidan-Ren was very good, and when you see that the use cases, they are quite similar, as Dr. Rie already mentioned, so they are quite similar also to our use cases. And of course, there are then maybe dependent on the region and dependent on the, let's say, on the branches, maybe some variances of the use cases, but the general idea is quite similar. And what we also do is that within International Manufacturing X, we are looking that we, let's say, get an overview about all the different projects and activities going on worldwide, and to coordinate them a little bit, to adjust the different views, and to see if when there are, for example, when there is one activity going on with product carbon footprint, to adjust the different activities, first of all in Germany, and then later on maybe also worldwide, that we have then a common understanding of how product carbon footprint should look like, or any kind of other topic.
ありがとうございます。オット先生いかがでしょうか。
Yeah, I think as mentioned, many of, let's say, the well, the use cases are global ones, so we need to address them together. And what I always find helpful is to, let's say, structure the task into, let's say, different layers, which is also why I mentioned earlier on this interoperability framework, which identifies 4 different layers, like the legal layer, the organizational one, the semantic one, and technical one. And I think we have, let's say, lots of experiences in working together on technical and semantic standardization, be it, for example, for very generic, let's say, aspects on ISO level, but also on W3C level, but also, let's say, industry standardization. OPC was mentioned earlier on, which we can basically, rely on and draw from. But of course, there will be other things that we need to, map somehow or analyze first, let's say, compatibility. I think, in particular, when it comes to the legal frameworks, like always, according to the Pareto law, there will be 80% which somehow match and others that don't. And then we need to basically make sure how to achieve interoperability also on these grounds. But I'm sure that this will be possible because, once more, we share the same challenges. And therefore, I think data sharing on a cross-border basis is of interest for all, players in the field. And these kind of, let's say, interoperability frameworks would allow us to structure the task and to cut, let's say, the task into manageable pieces. And that is something which I like. And I think we have also made, let's say, in the collaboration between Japan and Europe, great progress over the last 10 years and achieved a lot. So I'm convinced that we will also be able to address this issue.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。もう一つですね、こちらは入江さんに対するご質問になります。下の方の2番ですね。RRI もその IMX に参加していますが、どのような視点でこういう活動に参加されているのでしょうかというあたりご紹介いただければと思います。
はい、IMX、お声掛けいただいて RRI として、参加しています。ただRRI としてだけではなくて、これはもう国内の企業、国内のいろんな省庁を含めた団体とも協議しながらの参加にはなっております。でその中で一つはやっぱり今もう本当に国内でもデータスペース構築が進みつつあり、そういったところをどうやって国際的にインターオペラブルにしていくっていうところは本当にディスカッションポイントかなと思ってますし、先ほどOtto先生のスライドにもありましたけども、いろんなインテグレーションレベルから、最後にネステッドみたいな話もあって、そういうデータスペースそのものの多様性を認める中でどういう形でインターオペラビリティを確保していくかっていうそういった議論を本当に重要だなと思ってまして、そういった観点で参加しているっていうのが1点目です。でもう一つはセバスチャンの方からもありましたように、じゃあ、グローバルでやっぱ共通のユースケースっていうのをセットアップって多分重要で、それで多分それこそカーボンフットプリントのとか、あるいはヨーロッパが今主導してます DPP みたいな話っていうのは多分本当に国際的にもう連携しないと多分成り立たないというふうに思ってまして、じゃあそういう共通的なやっぱりユースケースのコンセンサス合意っていう中で、じゃあそれぞれが各リージョンでどうしていくか、でそれをインターオペラビリティ確保するために共通で何していくかみたいなところの議論の場としての IMX、 非常に期待しております。
はい、ありがとうございます。時間もほとんどなくなってきました。たくさんご質問いただいているんですけれども、すみません、私の取り回しが悪くてですね、全部お答えできませんが、ですね、何らかの形で、いただいたご質問には登壇者の方のコメントをいただければ、後日共有するような形にしたいと思います。で最後のご質問ですね、今日の聴衆の方々、 会場に来ていただいている方々、あるいはオンラインで聞かれている方々、のかなりの数がですね、いわゆる製造業、あるいは機械産業に、所属されている方がとても多いというふうに、思っています。で、皆様、今回の登壇された皆様からですね、そういう方々にですね、このデータスペース、あるいは産業データ連携という、切り口で、どんなアクションを、簡単に一言呼びかけたいとするならば、どんなものがあるでしょうかという、ご質問、これはお三方にですね、3名の方に、一言ずついただきたいと思います。まず最初に、じゃあ、シュナイダーさんからお願いしてよろしいでしょうか。
Quite short, participate in the activities we saw before, and then maybe also define your own benefits, your own use cases, and then integrate it in your daily business.
ありがとうございます。じゃあ、次はオット先生、一言いただければと思います。
Yeah, I like this question very much because I think we should embrace more the logic of the software industry, of the platform and the app economy. We must understand the fundamental logic, how this works, in order to be successful, well, in this field. And if I may, sometimes I still have the impression that software and data is still considered, let's say, the black sheep, not sure whether that exists in Japanese as well, of, let's say, well, the little sister of mechanical and electrical engineering, and this must change. So we need to embrace, let's say, the value creation potential of software and data in its full right, and not just as a side product of mechanical and electrical engineering.
ありがとうございます。では最後、入江さんの方から一言お願いいたします。
はい、なかなかその国内の状況とかって、これから本当に進めなきゃっていう中で、ぜひ本当に特に製造業の皆様にはこれをなんかリスクだとかコストと思わずにこれを使い倒してやろうというようなマインドでちょっと受け止めていただければなというふうに思ってございます。でこれRRIの中でも議論してますけど、これって例えばそのインターネットの黎明期には非常に近い状況なのかなと。でインターネットが勃興していろんなやっぱりビジネスがあるいはその利便性が高まってみたいなところを想起すると、やはりこういうデータスペースがグローバルで共有できることっていうのはいろんなそのチャンスがあるんじゃなかろうかと思ってます。そういったところをやっぱり夢見ながら取り組めていければなと思ってますし、そこに本当に皆様参加いただければなというふうに思ってます。以上です。
はい、ありがとうございます。ですね、今日は2時間という短い中でですね、いろいろ盛りだくさんなお話をいただきました。これでですね、セッション1、パネルディスカッションは以上となります。オット先生、シュナイダーさん、入江様、ありがとうございました。以上をもちましてですね、セッション1を終了させていただきます。皆様、登壇者の方々にですね、拍手をお願いいたします。
Thank you. ありがとう。
会場及びオンラインにて聴講の皆様、本当にありがとうございました。はい、この後のちょっと予定についてご案内、いたします。この後ですね、昼休みということで1時間ほど時間を挟みまして、午後2時からセッションの2を始めます。セッションの2ではですね、各国共通の課題に対する日本、欧州、アメリカですね、それぞれの分析の事例をご紹介いただきましてですね、デジタル施策における課題や国際協業で解決すべき論点について議論をしていただきます。ぜひ皆様引き続きご参加いただけるようにお願いいたします。